So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Medventions lecture series. Once again, to those who are not familiar with the lecture series, so this is Sunnybrook's MedTech specialized curriculum. For the next 11 weeks, we'll be meeting in this room every Thursday at 5 p.m. and we'll be addressing one fundamental topic in MedTech innovation and technology commercialization. Again, only the first hour lecture component of these events are available on webcast for remote participants, but all the hands-on kind of exercises will only be available to those who attend in person. Just a few announcements. So now registration again is open for workshops and lectures taking place in October. So please register at sunnybrook.ca/medventions. Also, for medical biophysics students who are taking this for credit, I've communicated with you today, connected you with mentors, and have shared more details on the grading scheme and evaluation. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email or come and speak with me during the break. So back to today's lecture. So you're an aspiring medtech innovator, and you have spent perhaps the past few weeks in the clinical environment trying to identify the clinical need that arises from a genuine and important clinical problem. And let's assume you have identified what you think is a significant medical need. So here's the trick. Without an accessible, compelling market, the most important significant need will not be solved. The number of and characteristics of people in your target market, their willingness and ability to pay, the presence and nature of competition in the field, all directly affect your ability to successfully commercialize a solution. And that's exactly what we are going to discuss today. So our workshop today is on the market research and a competitive landscape. I'm delighted to be introducing Nick Kerlick, who will be generously delivering this workshop for us. Nick has a sales and marketing career background, over 20 years with Amgen Canada, expertise in strategic planning and program management and change management. He specialized in new product commercialization and market analysis methodologies. He's the CEO of Cold Block Technologies. I'll leave it to Nick to tell you more about his background. Yeah, and he's also the co-founder of Virtuous Insights, a strategic management professional services company. Nick, thank you very much for being our guest speaker today, and we're looking forward to your workshop.
Thank you so much. What a great turnout. What a pleasure it is to be here today. And I'm assuming we have many people online, so I like to kind of walk around sometimes and talk, but you'll have to pardon me standing here in the corner.
For the first hour.
Yeah, for the first hour, out of respect for those that are connected with us online. And to all those online, thank you very much for joining us today. Again, my background, I started in biotechnology with a company called Amgen. It's a biotech company, a global company. I had the privilege of starting on day one. In 1991, I had a 23-year career with them. And in my last 10 years, my role was in strategic planning and program management. After 23 years, I decided to start a consulting company where I could bring some of these best practices that I had learned over a 23-year career to startups, to people who have aspirations of taking an innovation and commercializing it. So I did a lot of work with I was wondering, do you think we could dim the lights a little bit? But I'll just keep on going.
If you don't mind, just stay here so
okay.
I can see you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
And,
thank you.
Just for the record.
I get carried away sometimes.
Only the first hour.
Yeah. So I started mentoring startups in accelerators such as the Research Innovation and Commercialization Center. And I was fortunate to have been a panelist for many pitch presentations by startups that bring their innovations to the marketplace. And through that experience, I learned a lot about best practices, and what I also learned was also about the many gaps that we have seen in the various presentations, quite often in the context of not really presenting well or illustrating your understanding of markets, market segmentation. What's your go-to market? And then how are you going to springboard to follow-on markets? Same with competitive analysis. They say when a panelist of a pitch presentation knows more about the competition than you do, the game is over. So that's why we're here today, talking about market segmentation. We'll talk a little bit about competitive analysis, the various models that you could use to convey your understanding of market segmentation and competitive analysis. And we're also going to talk a little bit about market analysis and market research, because garbage in is garbage out. Good market segmentation work and good competitive analyses is based on doing solid market research. And we're going to just discuss market research at a high level for those of you that may be less familiar with it. For those of you that are very familiar with market research, this will be kind of an easy go through these slides. I've got a lot of slides to cover. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. We're going to have a dinner break, and after the dinner break, we're going to do 2 workshops. The workshops are going to move fast, but they're straightforward and they're a lot of fun to do. So let's get started. The objective today is to learn how to comprehensively research, analyze, and inform organizational strategic direction within your organization, or perhaps your project that you're working on. And the context will be competitive analysis and market segmentation. The goal for competitive analysis is to understand and effectively communicate your competitive landscape and how to apply this competitive information to inform your key organizational decisions. You do these exercises for a reason, and we're going to show you how that works. For market segmentation, we'll talk about how to succinctly articulate your market segments that you're targeting, and then how to apply both qualitative and quantitative information about your market segments to inform your organizational decisions. Because you have choices to make, and these modeling exercises can help you hone in on the right choices for your product and your organization. So we're going to first do competitive analysis overview, market segmentation, talk a little bit about market analysis and market research. We take the break, and then we go into 2 workshops. Let's start with competition. Yeah, competition, it drives innovation, but it can also spell your demise if you really don't know your competitors well. It's really critical to understand who your competitors are, so that you can determine not only the impact that you will have on a marketplace, or the impact that a new competitor will have on your organization if you're already in the marketplace. And really, it helps inform your value proposition and your competitive advantage. Who are the competitors? Could be a company that offers the same product or service. Could be a company that offers a substitute for your products. Companies with related competencies, or it can be just status quo. It could be a market that's just not willing to change to adopt your new innovation. This happens, and that is kind of a competing threat. And it's something that people forget, that you have to pay attention to just the simple status quo. Why do we do this? Typically, a single product or a service is rarely short-lived. Every competitor has their own aspirations. And I think it's really good to assume that your competitor knows more about you than you know about them. If you think you know more about your competitor, you may be in trouble. So it's really good to be on your toes. And competitive analysis positions you how to anticipate entering a market, develop winning strategies, developing that competitive advantage, and really how to succeed in the marketplace. Look, there are a number of different ways in how you can do competitive analyses. We're going to just review 4 high-level competitive models that are often used in business plans, or that are often used in various presentations, whether you're trying to seek a business partner to develop your innovation, or whether you're trying to seek venture capital funding so that you can pay for the development of your innovation and successfully commercialize your product. We're going to spend a little bit more time on the latter 3 of these examples, but the first one, market performance, just analyzes how markets, how they look, how are launch products performing. The pipeline funnel helps you focus on who to pay attention to in the future, what's coming down the pipeline. It's easy to learn about your competitors who are in the market today. There's a lot of information about them. It's a little bit harder to know who's coming in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years out. How do you look at that? How do you convey that? The competitor matrix model helps you assess how your competitors are differentiated from you, or how you're differentiated from your competitors. Actually, the workshop will be on the competitor matrix model. We're all going to do a workshop on that. And the strategic analysis, competitive analysis, helps you identify your threats and how real are they and who you should be paying attention to. So there's many different ways in how to look at competitive analyses. We're just going to not spend much time on this one. Market performance competitive analyses can be illustrated as a pie chart, as a bar graph, as you see here. It shows your competitors. It illustrates your competitors' performance. It identifies your market leader and your trends. And it can help you capture trends over a 1, 2, 3, 4, up to a 5-year period. Clearly, if you're entering a marketplace that is a crowded market, it's really critical to convey and understand your knowledge of the market and how it's performing. Who's the market leader? Who is trending upwards or downwards? These are critical elements. We're not going to spend much time on this because this is simple to do, but it's important to remember to do it. This is one of my favorite competitive analyses. I like to look into the future and what's coming down the pipeline. The competitive funnel. It's an illustration that helps you identify your products. It could be product class, it could be category of product, it could be the stage of development of a product. It's a good review as a starting point to understand to whom you should be comparing your product to. It facilitates the identification of big competitors that are coming down the pipeline, and it positions you to prioritize who to pay attention to. This is a real-world example. Company developing a therapeutic for the treatment of acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Okay, you have a very exciting product, but look how crowded this market is. And why I like the competitive funnel model for competitive analysis, because it can illustrate 4 or 5 critical things at a glance. First, you can see the stages of development of these various products, starting from stage 1, clinical development of a product, stage 2, right up to phase 2, phase 3, right up to launch. It shows you not only the product name, but the companies that are developing the product. And then you can do a deeper dive and go into clinicaltrials.com, and you can gather critical information on some of these products, such as the number of patients that are enrolled in these trials and so forth. The table shows you also the different classes of products that are coming down the pipeline as well. This is rich information. It just tells you what's coming, who is developing these products, and it helps you kind of hone in on who to pay attention to. The next one, the competitor matrix model, we're going to do a workshop on this one. This is one of my favorite analyses, looking at the competition. And I'm going to show you how we use this model for the product that we developed in my organization. The competitor matrix model helps you do a deep dive comparing your innovation to your top competitors. It helps you gain a clear understanding of differentiation. It can inform you on product development because it can inform you about your strengths and weaknesses and your competitor's strengths and weaknesses. And it informs you on your competitive advantage and overall strategy. Typically, the way it works is it's a 2x2 matrix grid where you show your product compared to your competitors, and then you evaluate your strengths and weaknesses based on a set of attributes that you choose. It's important, don't just choose attributes that work in your favor. I think you have to be brutally honest with these kinds of assessments so that you have a clear understanding, not only of all of your advantages, but some of your disadvantages as well. And here's an example, a company called Exalis. They're developing a therapeutic to halt or slow or reverse the progression of neurodegenerative disease, such as Huntington's and Parkinson's disease. Very exciting development. And here they compare their product to products that are currently on the market, and the attributes that they looked at are those that are meaningful to patients and to the caregiver or the physician, such as, does it treat a broad range of symptoms and diseases? How effective is it in regaining function? Okay. What about the side effect profile? What about the type of delivery? Is it an oral delivery, which is highly sought after in this area? And you can clearly see why they are excited. And again, this analysis can help you identify your strengths and weaknesses, also how you can develop certain aspects of your products. This is my company that I serve. I'm the CEO of Coblock Technologies. And we developed a lab instrument. It dissolves solid material into a solution so we can analyze elements. Geochemists use our instrument in a lab to dissolve rock so they can analyze the concentration of metals, gold, copper, silver. The Ministry of Environment and Climate Change purchased our technology. They are dissolving fish so they can analyze heavy metals such as lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic. Our technology can dissolve solid samples in minutes, where conventional methods can take hours. So we developed a competitive matrix model that showed the applicability of our product across an array of samples, base metals, precious metals, refractory elements. Not possible with other conventional methods that are used today. We can dissolve materials in minutes compared to hours. And with our product, we have shown that we can eliminate the need to use dangerous acids such as hydrofluoric and perchloric acid, where these are commonly used by labs to dissolve metals, alloys, and rock samples. And we're easy system to automate. So we use a model like this to convey to our business partners and to our future investors why we are excited about our product in this marketplace. In fact, this is my 5th presentation this week. I just came back from an angel investor roadshow where I presented to Angel One, the Greater Toronto Angel Network, Southwest Ontario Angel Network, and the Niagara Angel Network. And this was really part of our story. It wasn't presented in this way, but we did present slides that were adapted from this kind of an analysis. And it's critically important because people want to know, how are you differentiated? And this is a great analysis that shows that. So we're going to do a workshop on that where you're going to be able to do this kind of a modeling exercise. The 4th and the last competitive analysis model that we're going to review is the strategic landscape model. And it is also commonly done in the space of startups that are developing new innovations. This is a modeling exercise that helps you to evaluate the impact of your competitor strategies. What are the threats? What are the strategic advantages that various companies have? It can help you inform scenario planning. What are competitor moves? Pricing and promotions, partnering, licensing, predicting the likelihood of success of a competitor. And here's a real world example. Again, company developing now an oncology therapeutic for lung cancer. So a crowded market with a number of competitors coming down the pipeline. So you recall that pipeline matrix I showed you before that showed you the funnel? Well, in this modeling exercise, we selected various compounds and companies developing those compounds, and we analyzed it in a different way. In this modeling exercise, we looked at the probability or the likelihood of the company achieving or developing these products to approval, FDA approval or Health Canada approval. And on the bottom, you can see that we also looked at the potential impact in financial dollars. So the key here is we're often asked, what keeps you up at night, or who keeps you up at night when you have a marketplace where you have 10, 15 competitors coming down your way? We focus on the top right because these are the ones that have the biggest impact on the marketplace and your bottom line as well. And quite often, through various market research, you can have an understanding of who is most likely to bring their products to success. And an analysis that we quite often do in the biotechnology and medical device industry. Here's an example of a company called BrainFX. BrainFX develops clinical digital assessment tools for healthcare professionals to diagnose brain disorders. Now, they used different variables in their grid, but it's an adaptation of this kind of an analysis. What they showed is they compared their innovation to what's currently being used today, software companies, occupational therapists, clinical researchers, and they felt that they have the sweet spot of having a tool that's insight and strategy driven as well as technology driven, compared to just a tool and people driven pen and paper analysis. Still being done today. And this is a way in how they compare their innovation to what's currently being used today and how they're differentiated. That's how you do these analyses. This is a slight adaptation of that as well with our organization. We are a technology that is slightly premium priced to the two other competitors, but our technology, because we can dissolve samples in minute, we can push more samples throughput than any other technology in the marketplace. Again, another way of showing how you fit strategically compared to other products that are currently in the marketplace. So we're going to do an exercise after dinner. And I'm just going to give you the background right now, and then we'll revisit it when we come back to it. So you're raising funds to scale up operations for what's called the TAP3. It's a mandibular advancement device, which is used for people who have sleep apnea. And usually you insert this device while you're sleeping. You're asked to illustrate the competitive landscape and demonstrate how your innovation compares to major competitors. The assumptions are competitive products and services are already in the marketplace. You're going to learn about these because there's a pre-read that you have. It's a simple pre-read. We're going to fly through the materials. And then another assumption is your innovation will have advantages and strengths to the current competition. And what you're being asked is as follows. The assignment is you're going to use this single competitive matrix model to compare your product or services to your competitors. In the top row, you're going to identify your competitors, in the top row, choose your attributes in the left column, and then you're going to fill in the grid where you're going to illustrate how you're differentiated. So 3 steps to this exercise we're going to do. Create your competitor variables of the mandibular splints. You're going to create the attributes. How are you going to compare them? And then you're just basically going to do a scorecard. It's a really simple exercise. Once you learn how to do this once, it's something that you can apply to any innovation that you are working on in this program. So the key takeaways for competitive analysis is be astute about your competitive threats, who, when, how, and the competitive landscape needs to inform your strategic decisions. And these 4 tools that I showed you, they're powerful. Don't just do one, but if you can apply as many of these models as you can, you will really have an understanding of your marketplace and your competitors that positions you to make the right decisions and how to develop your innovation and how to enter a marketplace successfully. Okay, so that's competitive analysis. We're now going to switch gears and we're going to talk about market segmentation. Just a question for Ahmed. Would you like me to, can we take questions throughout this? Yes. Do you mind if we do that? So can I just ask everyone a favor here? Stop me in your tracks, put up your hand. I'd be happy to have a dialogue rather than me just sitting here talking to you while you're all very quiet. Feel free to interrupt. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have throughout the presentation. So now that I've come this far, are there any questions in regards to those analyses? Yes. What's your name? Can you just say your name as well, please?
Yeah, my name is Tina. And the first question that you tackled was how our launched products perform. And you had a graph that showed a 5-year trend.
Yes.
So I was wondering, not just in the medtech space, but in any space, where do you get that sort of data from in order to understand how our launch got?
Yeah, a great question. Thank you. So the question was, let me just go back to the slide. The question was for the market performance competitive analysis, where do we get the data to populate this? Several answers to that. We're going to cover that in the third section of today's presentation, but generally speaking, you can buy this information, but a lot of startup companies don't have the funds to do that. We didn't have the funds to do that when we were entering the sample digestion marketplace with my organization. So you could collect data from secondary market research. This is collecting information that is currently published in the market and is accessible at your fingertips. And we're going to cover and give you a lot of pointers today on where you can gather rich information either at a low cost or free of cost. You can also do qualitative market research at a very low cost as well, or free of cost. And then quite often you can gather quantitative market research information. So we're going to look at all of these examples, but great question, because this is a stumbling block for a lot of organizations. And it's critical to know that you'd be surprised at what is there for you to gather and how it can inform you to do these kinds of analyses. Next.
I think someone online first has a question.
Okay. How do I do that then?
So you just go there, and there's Q&A.
Q&A?
And here's the...
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So the question is, what sources of information, example, FDA submission about competitive products are in development? What sources of information, example, FDA submission about competitive products in development? We're going to cover that in the third section. I think that I've already answered part of this question as well. It was similar to what you had already asked. We'll get there again. Thank you. You might have to remind me how to do that again, by the way. So just, all right, great. Perfect. Do I just go back here? Okay. Okay, good. So let's talk about market segmentation. One of my favorite topics. Market segmentation. How many people here have done a market segmentation analysis? Okay, so you're new to this, and I'm assuming many of those online, this is new to them as well. Market segmentation is the process of identifying unique segments of an addressable market. It can be driven by qualitative or quantitative data and characteristics. That's why we're going to talk about market research later. And there are a variety of ways of performing market segmentation. And we're going to look at two ways of doing it, but irrespective of how you do it, the goal is to identify distinct segments of the customers that make up your total addressable market. And these are terms that you really need to know. So the total addressable market are all those potential markets and customers that you may serve with your innovation or your service. A served addressable market are segments that align with your value proposition and capabilities. And your target market is what's usually called your go-to market. I can assure you, if you are discussing your innovation with any business partner, or if you're seeking an investment round so that you can fund your development, you're going to get questions such as, what's your go-to market? How did you arrive to the go-to market? What's your total addressable market? And I'm going to show you some examples of these, but it's really important to know this nomenclature, because if you cannot answer this clearly, then it really shows that you do not have a clear understanding of your market. Why do market segmentation? It positions you to examine opportunities across a number of segments. It can inform your key activities, including how you do your R&D, your resourcing, how you do your targeting and your positioning with your product. We have to market these products. And it allows you targeted strategies, and it also helps you to succinctly articulate your target customers. It helps you answer these questions. And this is why I love market segmentation. It's very powerful, right? How big is your opportunity? What's your total addressable market? What are your target markets and why? What is your follow-on markets? How does your value proposition align with the needs of your target market? What's your go-to market strategy? Quite often, companies don't have the resources to go through all markets. Let's talk about geography. You launch a product, quite often, you start in a certain region in the world and you expand from there. Rarely does a company, startup, come out with a strategy where they tackle the entire global market. You just don't have the resources to do that. So you really need to have a solid strategy that is based on a smart market segmentation model that shows you your total potential markets and your go-to market, and then how you're going to springboard to expand with your strategy. It can help you demonstrate your projected revenues and market share. It can help you understand your R&D planning and how it aligns with the different market segments. And it can also help you understand who your competitors are within the market segments. I'm going to show you that example. One of these segmentation models we use to articulate who our competitors are, and they vary in the different market segments of the markets that we serve at my organization. So again, there's a number of different ways to do it. Today, we're going to look at two models that are commonly used in the industry. This is the single cascade model and the 2x2 grid model. Typically, one thing that's similar about all of the models for market segmentation, it's usually done in a stepwise manner, so it's very logical. That's why we're going to do a workshop on it today. It's simple and it's straightforward. There are numerous approaches that can be used. You usually use variables to help you define your market segments. And one thing that we know is that the totality of these distinct markets make up your total addressable market. That's common in all of these models. Let's look at an example of a single segment cascade model. There's a company, they were developing a medical imaging device. They're from Europe, and they have to start somewhere. And they used this single cascade model to show that, hey, we're going to start with the European countries because they know the space, makes sense. And they're with a focus on Germany because Germany is an excellent market for medical imaging devices. And the variables that they used to kind of hone down to their go-to market was, a geographic variable, a demographic variable, a psychographic variable, and a behavioral variable. This is just an example of how you can use different variables. You don't have to use all these variables. You can use one variable more than once. But the point is it just shows a logical thinking of who you're targeting. Because if you say, we're going in Germany with medical device product, okay, who are you targeting? Because they're not very clear. So their thought process was, we're going to go to European countries, focus on Germany. We're going to focus on radiologists and group buyers in hospitals that have 200 to 500 beds. We're going to focus on those who put a premium on customer service and are willing to adopt new technologies, and focus on those who perform over 20,000 imaging procedures a month. It's pretty clear. And you can imagine that a modeling exercise like this can also help you in your forecasting. Because someone's going to say, well, what? And you're going to see an example of that in the next slide. This is a medical imaging device example. Here's an example for hypertension. So hypertension is a common problem. It's a crowded market. There are a lot of great products that are out there to treat hypertension. And you have an organization that is developing a new antihypertensive. Now, because it's a crowded market and many products work very well, it's unlikely that you're going to catch all 50 million people in the United States with hypertension. So they created a thought process that was realistic, and a thought process that could help them convey what their potential is at launch, and then how they could potentially grow their forecast to a broader market. So the thought process was as follows: 50 million hypertension patients in the US. 10 million are at high risk for a cardiovascular event. Of those, 3 million hypertension patients who are at risk of a cardiovascular event may not be at their treatment goal, and therefore may be a candidate for your product. Because if you're entering a market with a new antihypertensive and patients are already being treated and they're at their treatment goal, you're not going to capture that pool of patients because they're doing well on therapy. And then you have those patients who are not at treatment goal who have private insurance, 20% of patients. So this is something that is also supported through market research. And you can see the different market research that was used on the right-hand side to help them come up with this thought process. It includes secondary data. It includes primary market research and various medical chart audits and so forth. So a very powerful tool. I like the single cascade model because quite often you get the question, you're developing this product and really what is your potential in the first year of launch? And quite often, many pharmaceutical organizations are confined to the private insurance market only at the very beginning. And then over time, they open up other reimbursement channels that allows you to access a broader market. And it really is a brilliant thought process that shows you that's the total addressable market that you could potentially address in the future. But this is really your go-to market that is most likely at the time that you launch your product. Could you imagine if you got this wrong and how you can get forecasting, you can mislead through forecasting, it would misinform the resourcing that you need in order to tap into these markets. So really a great, great, great model, and the single cascade model is an excellent model to inform your forecasting.
Sorry, what are chart audits?
Chart audits are, you can work with various organizations that have access to medical charts, and they're, you know, the patients are blinded, so you don't have access to who the patients are. But chart audits is real world. This isn't just market research where you're doing a questionnaire. Chart audits are real. And if you do 1,000 chart audits, you capture real world data on treatment patterns of patients and how they're progressing and how they're doing. Great question, thank you. Next example is the 2x2 strategic grid. I like this market segmentation model because it helps you characterize your markets. The single cascade model is an excellent model to help you forecast and put numbers and figures, and it helps you defend certain metrics, but it doesn't characterize a market. How does a market behave? Who are the competitors in the markets and so forth? This model allows you to do it. And you could use, again, you use variables to shape this kind of a model. There are geographic variables, demographic variables, industry variables that you can use, psychographic variables, behavioral variables. Let's look at a couple of examples of how you do this. It's a 3-step process. It's a real simple process, but it's powerful and it can tell you so much. The first step is you use a grid and you create your variables, and it can be multidimensional. Your variables should be actionable and meaningful, and the criteria that you should always have in mind is that these variables need to help you identify distinct segments that you can quantify or that you can characterize. I'm going to show you that in a moment. So I'm going to give you 2 examples. I mentioned to you our company, Colblock Technologies, develops a lab instrument. It goes in a fume hood. It takes these test tubes, you put your materials in the test tubes, a little bit of acid, you press the button, and in 10 minutes, your sample materials are dissolved, right? So this can be used for many different industries. This is a market segment. These are the variables that we chose for our technology at Colblock. What it shows you on the top is the industry segments that we serve. Okay, so the industries that do sample preparation or sample digestion processes, the mining industry, metals and alloys, Okay, ArcelorMittal or Dofasco, they need to analyze the raw materials so they understand the composition of metals they're working with when they create materials for their customers. Environmental, what is there contamination in soils and sludges on the bottom of riverbeds? Food, agriculture, and pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals is big news. The FDA recently, there was a report on several small molecules that had impurities. This was big news over the last week. I see some of you may be nodding your head. And this is how they identify these impurities with these kinds of processes. On the left-hand side are the buyers, the buyer segments. So we can sell our technology to academic labs, government labs, big commercial labs, as well as private industry labs. A lot of these companies and food companies, they have their own laboratories where they analyze various foods, but they also outsource various testing to big commercial labs. So this is our total market. We can sell our technology to any one of these buyer segments in any one of these industries, but it's impossible for us to go to all of these markets at once. So our go-to market was mining, and then from there, we're moving to metals and alloys, environmental, food, agriculture, and pharma in a stepwise, logical, and strategic process. We'll talk more about that later. Here's a company developing a product for hyperdyslipidemia. High cholesterol. There's an array of patients out there, starting from low risk to moderate risk to high risk. Those that can be controlled with lifestyle changes. Then those that are treated with statins, because statins are the gold standard typically for hyperdyslipidemia. There are those that are well controlled, those that are not at target, and those that are intolerant to statins. And people with hyperdyslipidemia are treated by family doctors, cardiologists, endocrinologists, internal medicine. So if you're developing a drug for hyperdyslipidemia, okay, how are you going to approach this market? Where are you going to start? Who are you going to focus on? These kinds of market segmentation models can help you make those decisions. Next step would be to characterize, to identify the distinct markets within that overall model. So, for example, for cold block and the sample digestion technology, we have identified 4 distinct market segments within the total addressable market. And you will see in the subsequent slides how they're distinct. But this is important because each and every one of these market segments, they behave differently. The competitors are different. So if we are trying to penetrate these markets, we have to slightly adjust our strategy in each and every one of these market segments. Hyperdyslipidemia is also broken down into a number of different market segments. So clearly, family doctors treat patients at low risk or those that are well controlled. Statins are commonly prescribed by family doctors. Patients are not referred to specialists unless they have a problem. And what you can see here, those that are not at target can still be treated by the family doctor, or they could be referred to the cardiologist, endocrinologist, or internal medicine specialist. And the same with patients that are intolerant or those that are at very high risk. This is important because if you're a startup company and you're developing a sales force that will be marketing these products to these different physician groups, there are the resources that you need to tackle family physicians and GPs compared to specialists is incredibly different. So this is an example of how market segmentation can inform your resourcing that you need to make the right informed decisions to develop your products. And again, a powerful model that helps define the total addressable market as well as the distinct segments of that market of which you may play in. The third step in this exercise is to characterize them. We're going to look at some examples. So with our technology, we have 3 major competitors. Fire assay, it's a pyrometallurgical process. There's microwave technology. They use these pressurized vessels to take the temperature of samples and acid at a very high level. And then there's hot block. A hot block is like a stovetop. It's like boiling spaghetti. You take an Erlenmeyer flask, you put it on a stovetop or a hot block. You put some acid into the flask, your materials, and it dissolves the material over time. And then there's something called fusion technology. And what you can see in this market segmentation model is that gold analysis is an animal in itself. It's unique. Gold is a sticky element, and a small sample size of rock is not representative of a large batch of rock. So they need to use this system called fire assay to dissolve very large sample sizes of rock in order to analyze gold and to determine get a representative sample. Fire assay is only used for gold analysis in mining. Microwave and hot blocks are used often in pharma, agriculture, food, and environmental testing. Fusion technology is often used in metals and alloys and some base metals. And hot block and microwave is commonly used in academic labs. So we sell our technology to each and every one of these buyer segments, as well as to the various industry segments, and our strategies vary. So how we differentiate our product to fire assay is different than how we differentiate our product to microwave and hot block. So we have different messages to laboratories that are in the food, agriculture, and pharma space compared to labs that are in the gold space. If you don't get this right, you're just going to really mess up how you launch a product, because your marketing program is focused on positioning and messaging. So how do you position your product in a marketplace? And how do you message the advantages of your product and the features of your product and the benefits of your product if you don't understand who the competitors are in the various spaces that we play in? And this is an example of how you could use market segmentation. If you don't understand this, it's problematic. Here's an example of hyperdyslipidemia. 45% of patients with hyperdyslipidemia can be managed through lifestyle change, right? So you're competing against kind of status quo there, and your product may not be indicated for low-risk patients. 33% of patients are at target, which is excellent. These are people who are well controlled. And then the balance of the patients are either not at target, they're statin intolerant, or they may be at high risk. And again, how you compete in these different spaces really depends on what your product label is by the FDA and Health Canada. Clearly, you can only do where you can only sell your product where you're indicated, but this can help you inform your ongoing research and development strategies, clinical trial design, and programs that allows you to eventually penetrate subsequent markets. So you may start perhaps in the right-hand side, treating high-risk patients at the beginning, but then later you can develop programs that can help you penetrate statin intolerant, people not at goal, and perhaps even have a better alternative for those people who are already responding and are at goal. That's your total addressable market. Each and every one of those are the distinct segments that make up the total addressable market. Here's an example of a company that adapted this kind of a model in their pitch presentation. This company was developing a contact lens to measure glucose and other biomarkers called Medela Health. They were telling their story to a group of investors. They were raising funds to develop their product. And you can see here in the table, they have very clearly outlined the various markets, right? The primary market, secondary market, and tertiary market. And the focus on type 1, type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetic, health-conscious patients. They actually quantified the number of patients that fall into each and every one of those segments, and they show a nice pie chart that shows the size of these segments as well. A great visual illustration. So this is an example where you can take this kind of methodology kind of in the background and then kind of adapt it for these kinds of purposes where you're illustrating to someone your knowledge and understanding of the markets and where you fit. CGM, I will get back to you on that in a moment. Thank you. I am not a diabetes expert, so yes, continuous glucose monitoring. Thank you. Okay, so case study 2, we're gonna do a market segmentation exercise. Okay, this is gonna be simple, we have a pre-read for it. You're a new company and you is formed to develop treatments for all types of sleep apnea. Your first product that's created is a device for sleep apnea. It's an oral mandibular advancement splint. We're gonna do the advancement splint again. It's custom molded, high comfort, produced by 3D printing. It's low cost to produce. It has improved compliance, it's less costly. You're meeting with a venture capital firm to raise funds. The firm has asked you questions about the sleep apnea market, and they want to have a thorough understanding of the market segments that make up sleep apnea. So the assignment is going to be to use this 2x2 grid to illustrate the sleep apnea market segments. And once these segments have been identified, we're going to use the workshop materials to characterize where possible and to quantify these segments, and consider the following variables for the 2x2 model. What are the different types of sleep apnea, and what are the different severities of sleep apnea? So just kind of helping you out a little bit here. But with the information that you have, this is going to be a very simple workshop. The information will be at your fingertips. Key will be to create the variables. So you're going to create the variables for the sleep apnea market. Then you're going to identify the unique market segments that make up the sleep apnea market. And then you're going to have the opportunity, if time permits, to characterize these various market segments. And again, this is a powerful modeling exercise because it really helps you to understand how you can apply these models in the various innovations that you will be focusing on in this program. And they're simple tools, they're fun to use, and they're powerful because once you do it, your understanding of the market goes to an entire different level. We're gonna now do the last section on market analysis. So as I mentioned before, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have access to the right information to help you identify the variables, characterize the various market segments, to be able to describe your competitors and identify your competitors, you're going to have a difficult time doing market segmentation as well as competitive analysis. So I structured this in a way to give you some helpful hints on where you can find some rich, meaningful information. But I want to first start with context, okay? Market analysis, it's critical. It provides answers, it generates insights, it informs decisions, and it helps answer critical questions, right? On your market, on your customer, your product, your service, your competitor. It helps you validate your assumptions. And its key benefits are, it helps you confirm your knowledge. It helps you set realistic targets. It ensures that you have confidence in your strategy and forecasting, and it helps mitigate risk, okay? The better that more accurate that you are in gathering information to do competitive analysis and market segmentation, the less risk that you have in developing your innovation and making perhaps a wrong mistake. There are typically two types of market research that's often done in this space: secondary market research and primary market research. Secondary market research is about searching for data that's already been collected. It's out there. You have to find it, and it's there. And primary market research is about you collecting the data directly because it's not readily accessible at your fingertips. Secondary market research, quite often we look at published data, population, demographic info, guidelines, surveys. It could be research studies and publications. But when we do primary market research, it can be either qualitative market research or quantitative. So qualitative, we can do focus groups, face-to-face interviews. Don't forget just talking to your industry peers. Quantitative is usually done in face-to-face interviews. telephone interviews or online interviews. And here are just some examples of the questions that secondary and primary market research help answer, right? Secondary market research often answers, you know, what is the market and how it's behaving? Who is my customer? Who are the competitors? Pretty simple and straightforward. But what if you were asking questions such as, are the customers willing to use my innovation? Now that's hard to find if you have a unique innovation and there's nothing out there, right? So you have to gather that information through primary market research, either qualitative or quantitative. If you want to ask the question, is the product or service that I have priced right? How do you know? How do you gather that information? Most likely you have to structure some kind of primary market research to gather that data. Or does the value proposition of my innovation align with what my customer is looking for, right? From their lens? How do you know? Difficult to answer that question with secondary data sources. So it's really important to understand what secondary market research can do for you and what primary market research can do for you. Market research also informs and drives the entire planning process of your innovation, from discovery right through to product launch and post-launch support. It can help you address market opportunities, product development, product partnering and licensing opportunities. We do a lot of market research before we launch products. Before you launch products, you're just about to lay the groundwork of tremendous resourcing, right? Hiring people, developing marketing programs. Then there's your post-launch research, and then market research is also used for life cycle management. For most of you that are at very early stages of coming up with idea generation, at early stages, most of market research is secondary and qualitative market research. There can be some quantitative primary market research if you have the funding in place to do that and if it's absolutely necessary. But usually, most of you will be focusing on secondary resources and qualitative primary market research. So we're going to talk a little bit about this. Many people who don't have classical training in market research don't know where to start and they don't know where to end. So here's a couple of helpful hints that can help you out. It's very straightforward. It's a multi-step, 7-step process. Starts with define the info that you're seeking, evaluate your sources of information that can help you address that info. Start with secondary sources always. It's simple, straightforward, and it's cheap or free. Determine your primary research needs if you need to do primary research. Then design the primary research methods. You do your sample and data collection. You analyze. You make informed decisions. And then you do it again. It never ends. Because what you think you know about the market today is short-lived, because markets change really, really quick. You may have a new competitor that comes in and they change the entire market landscape with their innovation. And then you have to understand, well, how do I react to this? What do I do? And you may have to kind of go through this again. Market research really is something that is embedded in all the things that we do and all the modeling that we do. You have to get it right. When you're trying to define the info sought, here's just a couple of pointers, some questions that you should be asking, right? How big is the market? How's it growing? How do global markets compare? What are the market drivers? What is impacting the market? Who are the leading competitors? What material information has been made available? These are questions you need to ask when you're thinking of your innovation, whether you're designing something that's not out in the marketplace yet, or you're trying to improve upon an innovation that is already out there. By asking these questions at the very beginning, kind of helps you move along the process. If you're not disciplined in asking the questions, what is it that I need? Then you could really mess up in the information that you're seeking and how that informs the decisions that you have to make. Evaluate your sources of information. There's garbage out there, and there's a lot of great sources out there. Some things for you to consider is public versus private organizations. What are the sources of information? How timely is the information? How forward-looking is it? how targeted is the information, and how credible is the information. We'll talk a little bit about that. Usually start with secondary sources. So you can start with broad information and then work your way down to specific. Broad information can be census documents, internet articles, trade shows, trade and industry specific publications such as clinicaltrials.gov. You can get just unbelievable, meaningful information from these kinds of sources. Government sources, registries, financial data. Talk about the internet a little bit. We're on the internet every day, and there's just so much information there. You can go from broad information right to specific information, such as databases. There's two websites I'll talk to you about, CEDAR and EDGAR. I'll expand on that in a moment. Government collected registries, published market reports, analyst reports, industry peer and networks. I've had an opportunity to work with tremendous databases that are offered through the University of Toronto, for example. These are these rich sources of information. And the ones that I often use for medical devices as well as pharmaceuticals is marketresearch.com and IBIS World. Have any of you accessed these sources of information at the library? So all you need to do is, you don't have to necessarily be an alumni of U of T. Anyone from the public can go into U of T and ask to get access to these search engines. They give you a special code and username, and there are specific computers that are dedicated to access these kinds of reports. And these reports are often made available to industries for thousands of dollars, but you can actually get access to this free of charge. So I want to give you an example. We did a case study where we were looking for published reports on the global orthopedic device market. We were supporting a company that was developing a orthopedic device with stem cell treatment. And they were looking for information on the market. So we went to this database and we came up with IBIS World, and we found the following information in these reports. There are about 300-page reports. They provide an executive summary of the orthopedic device, global orthopedic device market. Shows you trends globally, specific global orthopedic device market analysis by year, and it shows you the trends, how many orthopedic procedures took place in Europe, USA, Asia Pacific, rest of the world. My eyes can't see the bottom one in the yellow. Someone can yell it out. There you go. It also breaks down the number of procedures by site of your body, such as hip, knee, spine. Can you imagine this is accessible at your fingertips? So if you are doing, addressing an innovation opportunity for orthopedic devices, and you don't know much about this marketplace, by going to U of T and getting access to the search engine, this is rich information that can help you inform what to do, where to focus on. Which region do you focus on? Which site do you focus on, depending on the development program of the innovation that you're working with. These reports also can tell you about the key issues and trends affecting the market and the leading competitors. There's a long list. So remember when we talked about competitor analysis? Well, this report tells you who they are. And then in subsequent pages, there's detailed information on each and every one of these competitors. So this is free. This took us 15 minutes to get this information. And you can imagine how you could spin your wheels by just going on the internet and trying to find, how many procedures are being done globally and so forth, when you got it all here at your fingertips. Very powerful tool, and very helpful. And by having access to these search engines that are free of cost, you can just be so efficient in what you do in your analysis and planning. I think I just have a few slides left. And CEDAR and EDGAR, also very popular. These are websites that public companies have to report through CEDAR and EDGAR. CEDAR is the System for Electronic Document Analysis and Retrieval. So you can get all their public and financial information through these search engines here because it's publicly available. So you could find all kinds of information on news releases that come out of these companies that are now publicly available on your intellectual property, your various offerings and proceeds, study results, various partnerships that these companies are working for. Because quite often you're asked, find a proxy out there that has a product similar to what you're developing. By tapping into CEDAR or the US filings, you could, for example, find a company that recently got bought out, let's say, by another organization. And you could do a modeling exercise where you try to come up with the valuation of your own company based on your innovation, based on this kind of data that you can get from these sources. Very rich and very helpful. Pay attention to the credibility of your data, right? So ask yourselves the following question. What was the research provider's purpose in presenting the data? Who collected the data that you're seeking? How was the data collected? What type of data was collected? Is the data consistent with data from other sources? And then try to do your own scorecard on the data that you're working with. Is it credible or is it not credible, right? I wouldn't trust Wikipedia, but Wikipedia is cool. I go to Wikipedia all the time, but I don't trust it, right? There are media reports out there. Sometimes media gets it wrong. Sometimes they get it right. Don't trust the media. What about Health Canada reports? You know, reports from clinicaltrial.gov. You're going to put a lot more confidence on that. So pay attention to what you're working with and be careful, right? Be careful. Just very quickly, primary market research. We're going to spend less time on that because it's likely you're not going to spend a lot of time modeling primary market research. So just very quickly, primary market research, it's rigorous structured process developed by specialists to ensure robust, applicable, and unbiased results. The information sought may be qualitative or quantitative. It costs money. It takes a really good expert, but you could do it on your own. You could do your own survey. You could do it online. You can do it through email. You have to be careful of the type of questions that you ask and how your audience will answer those questions. It takes some experience to do this right. It can go wrong if you ask a question in the wrong way. There are low-cost ways of doing primary market research. You can do informal focus groups, informal interviews, online bulletin boards, email blasts, direct mail. You could all do this now, and you can achieve pretty good results. Then, of course, you can go to an outside organization and pay them, and they can do large reports for you to answer questions that you need to answer before you go to market. Always start with qualitative and go to quantitative, because your qualitative market research helps inform the questions you need to ask for quantitative. And quantitative market research is very expensive, so you want to make sure that you get it right. And that brings me to my last slide, market research. It is critical to inform, mitigate risk, and confirm the values of your offering, and market research is a continuous and iterative process. It never ends. Take it seriously, but know the avenues of how to navigate in this territory. There are things at your fingertips that are low cost, accessible, high quality information. Work with it, use it, it will help you. Again, don't forget, follow a stepwise process. It's simple when you do it, to know where you start, where you're going to end, and it just makes it a lot easier for you. And that is our hour today. So thank you very much. We're happy to take some questions. Okay, there's a couple of questions here. So Q&A, okay. So we addressed the first question. The second question is, I am an online participant. How do I get a copy of your slides? Contact Ahmed. Is that fair? Yeah, okay. Ahmed is going to address your question. Are there any other questions online or in the audience today? How about a set of hands? How many found this helpful? Yeah? Okay, great. You have a question back there.
Right, I have two. I'm going to try like a little bit of analogy. Say you're in a pitch competition, you obviously have no time, and you're comparing with the comparative analysis to your competitors. One specific competitor has a couple advantages over the certain variables.
Yeah.
Would you kind of omit that information or almost set yourself up by saying we have three disadvantages or one main advantage to set yourself up for a question, or would you just omit it in general?
Yeah, no, great question. Be brutally honest. Don't butter up your service or your product, because you have to assume that your audience, just assume they know more than you. And if you mislead them, the game is over. And I think there are reasons why you're coming to a marketplace with something. Let's just assume you have some kind of an advantage, and therefore you have an exciting opportunity and a competitive advantage. We have to assume that. But amongst all of the features in how you compare and differentiate to a competitor, you may have some disadvantages as well. You need to know that. You need to be brutally honest. But but that's an opportunity for you to say, what are you doing about it? So for example, you could have 5 attributes and you could have 3 competitors, and you could show, generally speaking, you have a lot of advantages, and you say, we have 1 or 2 disadvantages here. We have a development program in place. This is what our plan of action. This is how we're going to address it. And at launch, this is kind of our competitive position at launch. And in 2 years from now, we expect to have a significant change that will even give us a higher competitive advantage. And then that plays into your forecast, right? So your revenues may be based on a certain competitive profile. And then over time, your profile may change. It's like a company wants to maybe enter a cell phone market, right, or something. It's unlikely that the product is going to have an advantage over every possible aspect over Apple, right, or Samsung. But they may have some competitive advantages. But over time, one would expect they would have a development program that would just kind of chip away, right? So be brutally honest when you do that exercise, because you don't want to mislead your audience, right? You're not helping anybody, especially yourself in that example. That's a good question.
Yeah. I have one more.
Okay.
So you were talking about Cedgar and Edgar about public information
Yep.
and public companies, but in terms of seeing your main competitors, private companies, is there sources out there to get that financial or information from those companies?
Yeah, you can get access. You can go to Mars, can put out in various intelligent reports. There's venture capital reports. I mean, if if you're working with a venture capital, a person, many of you may, in time, and you have colleagues out there, you can leverage certain reports out there on these companies. There are various reports and search engines that can help you address some of these, where you look for various proxies. Private companies is harder to get. It's not, right? The data is not out there, but offline, we can look at several more of these search engines that are available that can help you get access to these. There's another program called Data Monitor, for example, in the biopharma industry, which is very good. So there's a number of them, but it's harder to get. Keeps people up at night, including myself. Yeah. Another question? Yes.
I have a question about this cascade model and
Okay.
So first of all, what mental model versus take that target? In my experience, a lot of companies push software and want to target everything. You said initially like companies don't target everything. That
Yeah.
So you target, but in consulting companies, in my experience, they want to target everything. And so how do you get to that thinking of your software? Do you
They make those decisions. Okay, so the question from the audience was, when you're looking at the single cascade market segmentation model, what is the thought process that goes into channeling your market from a total addressable market to a go-to market? That was the question. And the example that was given, there are some software companies where they try to go at multiple market segmentation, market segments really at the get-go, correct? And what is the thought process of funneling it down? I think the answer to that is maybe that's a unique thing in the software industry. But in many other industries, a lot of what drives this funneling process is the fact that not all organizations have the resources to reach out to all these markets globally. Like, so just as an example, many innovations start in a region. Starbucks, right? Starbucks started in a certain region in the United States, and then they got more popular. They expanded, and eventually they became global. Same with pharmaceutical companies, right? They are now focusing more on the markets where there are low reimbursement barriers and they have better access compared to other countries where reimbursement is really high and they have higher access. They also have pricing strategies. There are some markets that are open to higher pricing and other markets that are really a pain. And they kind of have a lot of pressures to keep your prices low. We know how the world works and how these industries work. They typically go for the markets that they can achieve a higher price first. Example, USA. You typically go for the markets that are maybe friendlier with reimbursement policies and market access policies. And that's why Canada is not always the first market where drugs are launched. This is a great example of the single cascade model. Your total addressable market might be the world for certain products, a global company. But your go-to market, they have a pecking order. They start in the US. And then there are certain other markets that are more favorable. There are many markets in Eastern Europe that are now being prioritized ahead of Canada for certain product launches because they're more favorable. And that's the brutal reality. So these are just some examples of various market drivers that plays into that kind of a funneling exercise. Is that a good example? Or?
You look for more favorable markets and
Sure.
software, not necessarily be location, like there might be some other aspect.
Yeah, some other companies might base it on knowledge of markets. So some people may be more familiar with a certain geographical area than others, and they don't dare to go to those other places because they know the market in a certain region. So pretty good. There are just a lot of factors, but ultimately the variables that you use are the variables that help you kind of funnel down to where you think you're going to have the greatest success at the get-go. Okay. One more question? One more question. Okay.
Can you give us an example of how you would use a resource such as CDR in order to inform
Yeah, so the question was, how would you use CDAR or EDGAR to inform your competitive analysis? If you are a publicly traded company and you're responsible for for certain financial and disclosure as well as other company disclosure, you could have an earnings call, and in your earnings call, right? So once a quarter, typically. Your CEO with its leadership will do an earnings call to the market, and you'll report on an outcome of a clinical trial. And that trial, did you meet your primary objectives or your secondary objectives, or did you not meet them? And based on that report, which is now publicly available, it will have a certain impact on the market. Are you going forward with a product, or are you actually halting the development of the product? And that may play into how you maneuver based on that kind of information. That's just the simple, straightforward public information. And there was one here. I'm not going to read this last one, but oh, you did it? Thank you for that comment, Bill Herman. I'm grateful. So we're a little bit late, I'm sorry, but there were some great questions here. I hope you enjoyed this. We're gonna do I don't wanna keep you here late, but let's just grab a bite to eat, take a little break. We're gonna do a workshop here. For those of you that are online, I understand you're not gonna participate in the workshop, so thank you. I hope to see you again. And for those of you that are here, we're just gonna do these workshops, and we're gonna have a little bit of fun. Okay, thanks. Great.